Hi everyone, it is Suzanne. I am doing a very special and unique video because I want to thank everyone that has been there on behalf of myself and my family with regard to our new grandbaby that had some issues last month. So I'm going to kind of do, I think, a synopsis of what I did in terms of energy work because it was probably the most fascinating journey with a beautiful and wonderful outcome. But before I go into that, truly your cards, your thoughts, your prayers, your financial support for their unsurmountable bills, all of that on the GoFundMe, etc. All of that effort that was given was so incredibly beautiful and overwhelming. Whether you're a family, a friend, a client, a stranger, it was just a beautiful, beautiful representation of what life is about. And I just really would like to express on behalf of not just myself, but my entire extended family, and especially Mitchell, Aja, and Ramona. It was just beautiful and continues to be. So thank you, thank you. At this point in time, I want to start the video by saying she is now reached her 1 month point. She had her 1 month checkup and she is doing great. She still has some issues as far as they're doing more MRI scanning on the brain, etc., to make sure that she did not get compromised in any way, shape, or form. And so that is the only thing that we're still kind of hanging out there on. But I hopefully can integrate this into eBlast with some photos of Ramona and the kids so that you can all get a little peek at how gorgeous she truly is. So basically, Mitchell is my third son out of four kids, and he's what, 30, 31 years old, something, 31, 30, 31. Wow. And Aja and he got married in our yard. I think a lot of the Vibe Tribe people are aware that they were married in our yard with a beautiful ceremony 2 years ago. And incredible, awesome time. And we're looking so forward to having their baby. It was a great pregnancy. Aja was very healthy. They were very excited about it. But towards the end of the pregnancy itself, Aja had something to do with the cord and the placement on the placenta, and the doctors decided that they wanted to actually move her due date up by inducing her because they were worried about something about the cord issue. I'm not really quite sure about what that was all about. So they induced Aja on the 12th of September of this year, just last month here. And she went into the hospital. Everything was great. Everyone was excited. She was induced, and it felt like everything was going well. I was actually working that day. Even as a psychic intuitive and grandmother, I didn't really feel anything was off. Um, they called later that night and said absolutely nothing is happening, nothing of the drugs is kicking in, and I guess we're going to labor into tomorrow, and then they're going to see what happens. And so our goofy family was super excited because that meant that the baby was going to arrive on Friday the 13th, and for our ridiculous Halloween family, we thought that was super cool. So still not much was going on. We're trying to get the baby to move and doing all kinds of things. And eventually they decided to take it via C-section. And I believe it was around 2 in the afternoon, as far as I remember getting a hit. And I was sitting here thinking, they're going into a C-section. It's happening. So still thought everything was fine. So much for being psychic in this regard here. Yeah, and then I get the phone call. And I get the phone call from my son, who is literally terrified and shaking voice and saying, Mom, I need you down here right away. The baby's in the emergency room right now. We don't know what's going on. And I was just like stunned. And thank God I'm only about 8 minutes from the hospital that they had chosen for the birth. And so I jumped in the car. What had happened was they took the actual baby via C-section, and this is all I knew. So I just knew that they were having trouble and they're looking at her. I pulled up to the actual roundabout in St. John's Hospital, and an ambulance pulled in right when I did. And the crew was getting out of the ambulance, and I had not heard yet from anybody that they were taking Ramona anywhere. And I looked at that ambulance and I thought, that's for my grandkid. What's going on? And I literally walked side by side with this team all the way down into the baby ward, and they're pushing the cart thing, the thing that's so scary looking that the baby sits in, where the hands have to go through the holes, etc. And I knew with every ounce of my body that was going to be for my grandchild, and yet I'm like, what's going on? No one said she was going anywhere, but I knew it. The team goes this way into the emergency ward. I go into the birth center and find poor Aja, my daughter-in-law, just loopy as all get out because of all the drugs they had been using to try to get it to move, and terrified. And no son at this point because he was in with the baby. And I was like, what the hell? And then boom, I get this download, immediate download in my head. And I look at this nurse and I said, what's going on? And they're like, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. And I'm like, huh. And I keep hearing in my head that it's a valve in the heart, and I knew nothing, and this nurse didn't know anything at this point in time. So within a couple of moments my son comes through the door and from the emergency side, and he's white as a ghost and he's terrified, and I said, honey, what is it? And he said, they don't know. Literally, she came out of the C-section, everything was great, we held her for 10 minutes and immediately she turned blue. They zipped her off into the other room, and we've been sitting here terrified, and now I just saw her in there, but they won't let him close because they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And I said, well, has anyone said anything that it's a heart valve? And he's like, what? And I said, I keep getting it's a heart valve. And my kids are used to me. And so he didn't say anything, positive or negative. He's just like, I don't know, I don't know. He was just stunned. Well, the whole group comes in with the cart that I had walked in with, and the whole transport team is now telling us that they can't handle this at this hospital because she indeed has something going on with her heart. And they don't do hearts, much less infant hearts, at this hospital. So they were transporting her to the Masonic Hospital in Minneapolis, and they were going by ambulance, and we were to be following. And at this point, the doctors were with her, and I said, I know this sounds a little weird, but can I ask, is it a heart valve? Because they only said heart. I said, is it a heart valve? And is something not working on the left-hand side of her heart chamber and something swinging like an open gate? And this woman looks at me and she's like, what? And I said, well, I know that sounds weird, but I see things and I know things sometimes, trying to play that down. And I said, I just would like to know what it is so that I can pray for that, and see what I can, offer for support from my end. And she just looked at me and she kind of like brushed me off and said, well, we don't know anything. That's why she's going to Minneapolis. And I'm like, okay. And the other lady said, well, what did you say you saw? And I said, again, it's left hand side of the heart chamber and something's flopping like an open gate. And I don't know what that is because I don't know anatomy. And she's like, yeah, we don't know anything. And again, shut me down. And I'm like, okay, not something that is very, that's pretty common. I get that a lot in the Western medicine. They just shut you down. And so I'm like, okay, fine. So I grab my son, we jump in the car, we leave Aja with her grandfather. She couldn't be transported until later after she was stabilized. We go down to the Masonic and we're sitting there waiting, and the nurse is coming back in and back in and back forth and back in and back and forth. And so finally she says, come on back into the NICU and you can see the baby. And we're trying our best to get her stabilized right now, but I'd like to at least let you see your daughter so you're not so scared. And my poor son was literally just white as a ghost and terrified. Walk in there. I have never in my life been in a NICU. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen preemie babies like that. I've never seen anything like that. And the weird part for me, those of you that know me in this video stuff, it to me felt, I was so incredibly calm. I was so calm. It looked very much like a spaceship, to tell you the truth. It looked like you were in a different environment with tubes and beeping machines, and everything was crazy and everything was hooked up. And poor little baby Ramona, she was 6 pounds, 13 ounces, I believe, and she was completely covered in, tubes and monitors and beeping and not moving one iota yet, and just, breathing because of the machines, etc. And I was 100% calm because it felt so alien. It felt so spaceship like that I felt like everything was going to be okay. And I can't utter any other words than that silly sentence. It just felt like it was going to be fine, but yet we still didn't know anything. And so the cardiologist comes over, this very lovely, young, very tall man, and he was Indian, and he was very charming. And he said, can I answer any questions for you? And I said, okay. And I reiterated what I said with the other doctors. I said, I know this might sound kind of silly, but blah, 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 blah. And he looks at me and he goes, huh. And he goes, no, you're exactly right. It's her mitral valve on the left-hand side. And I said, I don't know what a mitral valve is. And he pulls us out of the thing, and he pulls it up on his phone, and he says, look at this. And I said, that's exactly what I see. And I said, and the thing that's flopping is the thing that's not working, right? I said, it's like a gate and it just isn't latching. And he said, right. So it's not latching, therefore it's not pumping. So half of her heart was not pumping at all. And this can be extremely, I mean, it can obviously be a death situation, and they didn't know where she was at with this, much less the brain getting any oxygen because nothing was circulating through the body. And then the lungs were filled with all kinds of fluids. So it was a pretty dire situation. And they were very honest, saying this is extremely dire. We do not know what's going to happen with her. We don't know anything more than it's the mitral valve, blah, blah. So this wonderful man looks at me and I said, "Thank you for telling me that." And he goes, "How did you know?" And I said, "Well, I see things and I hear things. And I do healing work, and if I know things, I can work on them." And he said, he looked at me and he goes, "Look it up on YouTube and get to work on your end." And I go, "I'm on it." So he was adorable. I loved that validation that I wasn't nuts. And we proceeded to go into the waiting situation until his wife could come later. And I started literally working on the mitral valve because the way that my telepathy works is if I can see something, I can do the energy work of it and for it. And again, be very clear that I'm not having a hubris, egoic attitude that I fixed anything. This is something healers do. We are channels. We bring the information and the energy through. We work with the higher self, the angelics, the God source. We are the channel that brings the information and the energy through for the healing. And if I can see the mechanics of what I need to do and align with my guidance, they tell me exactly what to do. And I worked on it for 2 full hours that night and into the evening through sleep state. And then by morning, I knew I had to do only about 30 minutes more. And my guidance said, "It will be fine. Within the hour, you will hear that it's fine." And sure enough, I'm home now, and the kids are in the hospital together. Baby's still in the NICU. And my son calls and he goes, "Mom, it's amazing. The mitral valve started working." And I'm like, "That is so awesome." And my son knows what I do. And he said, "Good job, Mom. Keep working because there's more stuff. Now our lungs are really bad. We have to get rid of the fluid." And I said, "I'm on it." So I started working with the lungs and the fluid. And this baby was so intricately meshed with my field. I'm what's called a full blown psychic empath, meaning I feel the other person's feels in my body. And when it's my own granddaughter, it was extremely meshed, and my lungs were hurting. I couldn't even get air. And so as I worked and worked and worked, I used my body as the template, and I knew exactly when they were cleared because my lungs cleared. So again, I texted my son and I said, "You're going to hear within the next hour or so that her lungs are fine." Boom, gets the phone call. "Mom, I can't believe it. Her lungs are fine. This is awesome. Keep working," because she's not doing anything. They're really starting to get concerned that she's not reacting. She's not moving. She's not doing anything. They don't know if she's brain dead or what. And that's when it started to get pretty scary. So I began a ritual in my healing room. Oftentimes, I will pull out my witch slash shaman slash alien self healer, and came down here and meditated on it quite a bit, and got some ridiculously strong guidance on what to do. My room has a healing, basically a massage table for the healing bed when I work on clients. That's where I put Ramona's essence or her I intented the work for her. And then I have a table where I work with my clients in the intake. That's a round circular table. And I worked a different ritual there. So I had two things going on. Again, you don't need to even understand or believe any of this, which is just fine. I'm not here to sit there and say, this is all about me and I did this, but it was the most fascinating work that I've done in a really long time. I was instructed to work with snake energy, which is something that I want to say, gifted by the shamans in Peru. Oftentimes, shamans will sit with the triad of the condor, the puma, and the snake. And they've asked me several times to sit in the position of the snake, which is the cosmic position. They know what I do in the ethers, and they know that I work with the templates and the cosmic realms. So they gifted me the position of snake quite a few years ago. I was then gifted a snake skin, a huge rattler skin that is literally almost over 5 feet long. And it is something that I've kept in my other healing room and put away. And I heard, "Get up there in your healing room and grab the snake. This is important." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I think it was probably going to be all deteriorated. I haven't looked at it forever." I pulled that bugger out and it was as pliable and malleable as possible. It was unbelievably beautiful shape. I laid it out. Hopefully I can get a picture on the presentation that we send this out in. I laid it all the way down that actual healing table. It took the whole entire table almost. And I started to build what we would call an altar. being led by cards that I pulled, being led by what I was hearing in my head. I was being led to work into the system of what would be called her hara line or her spine because her electrical system was not intact yet. And I started to create another altar on the other table that was talking to the universe, like, what the hell is going on and what do I need to know? This is when I got the download that Ramona was not even in the body in any way, shape, or form. She was in what we would call the ether state still. Um, it was unbelievable and fascinating. I oftentimes, as a practitioner, can find fractals of my clients that are in the ethers, meaning if there's trauma, I'll fractalize a piece of me and it'll be in the ethers. And it's important and imperative that we put those back in the body for wholeness. But this was a whole nother story. She wasn't even in, meaning her soul had not chosen to completely drop in. She was still in flux of deciding if she was going to be in this realm of humanity on this planet yet, and she wasn't sure. And so I reached out to a dear friend and spiritual worker in Sedona to get a little backup. She's a crystal bed practitioner. Asked her to boot up her bed and get the information in alignment with what I was getting. She got the same exact information. She said, Suzanne, they took her too early, right? Did she get induced or something? And I said, yeah. And she said, what was her due date? And I said, I actually don't know. And we pulled up the calendar together, and at the same time we said, holy shit, she wasn't supposed to be in until the 17th. And remember, they had taken her out on the 13th. And so it was only the 14th when I'm doing all this. And I'm like, oh my God, she's pissed in some regard from a bigger perspective because she wasn't supposed to be in yet. And I'm like, wow, what is that about? And we went deeper. And then my girlfriend says, well, obviously, Suzanne, the 17th is the supermoon lunar eclipse and the portal opening and the beginning of equinox. I mean, it was the most powerful day that we've had in this entire calendar year and for a very long time. And this little baby is actually a gigantic essence that knew exactly what it was doing in alignment with that incredibly beautiful, big, gigantic, powerful portal of energy was supposed to be her entrance. And this creates what we would call birth codes. And we are coded in terms of when we come in, how we come in, and this sets an instruction set for our lives. And the medical field doesn't understand anything about this stuff. And they chose to literally remove her 4 days prior to her entrance. And this essence, this entity of baby, higher self, soul, whatever words you want to use at this point, was not clear if that was going to be okay because it would shift all of the actual coding of the, I don't know, not only the entry, but the whole foundation of this being. And it was fascinating to me. And I'm like, holy crap. So I went into deep meditation and said, what? And my girlfriend went in and did her crystal bed stuff and supported what I was doing. I went into deep meditation and asked, what is it that I need to be doing here? So I filled out the snake skin. I filled out the other table of stuff with crystals and incense, and I'm burning and I'm chanting and I'm drumming and I'm doing all these things. And then I went so completely out of body and literally found her. Okay, I didn't didn't know I was going to do that. So it was the most amazing, intimate connection. Okay, and had to have a little chat with her in terms of, now I'm grandma to incoming granddaughter saying, we want you here, we need you here, you are important, and what can I do? And my guidance had me do all of this really weird stuff that I've never done before. And I'm just going to say it because I'm going to put it in my book that is being produced right now. Because at this point, I don't care what people think. And again, I want you to clearly understand that there is a whole medical side happening at the same time. This baby is in a NICU, is being taken care of by beautiful, wonderful professional people. When I scan remotely that room, it was completely, I can see in my head, I can go into that room out of body, and it was completely filled with professionals that are watching, that are monitoring, that are medicating her. They're doing all kinds of things. So this is a collaboration. But what I really want to point out is when I looked in the NICU, it was the most incredible it's like I've done so much hospice work and death and dying work. It was like the opposite of that because death is birth and birth is death. The entire time you had medical people standing, I want to do this so you can see it. Medical people standing, there was 2 and 3 light people behind them. So these are the two real life so-called human beings, and there's 4 light beings behind them. So every person that was a human being had at least 2 light people behind them. It was the most incredible, beautiful, unbelievable, powerful thing I saw. So I knew everything was working in concert. And I had my side to do in terms of what I was being guided from the soul's perspective, and they had their job to do to hold the human form in stasis of sorts until this was in alignment. However, they had no idea this was even going on. So what happened is I went out and I'm doing 5 things at one time, literally, because that's how my brain does this. And I am holding the space of both rituals. I'm building the ritual over on the snakeskin. I'm pulling cards. I'm drumming. I'm doing all these things. And then at the same time, my telepathy is out into the universe working with Ramona, incoming Ramona. So this is all happening. And then I heard, well, you have to figure out this timing because this is going to make the difference of bringing her in because she's 4 days off in her biological time codes. So this was new work for me. I found myself in this space, in this place, in the ethers of feeling like CERN. If you don't know what CERN is, CERN, it's an acronym for the largest particle physics laboratory. It's in Geneva. It was established in 1954. It's where all kinds of particle laboratory tests are being done. Its main function is to provide particle accelerators and other infrastructure needed for high energy physics research. They do things in a collider mechanism, in many different kinds of colliders, gigantic things. So there's lots and lots of conspiracies out about CERN. It's CERN again. That it alters and changes timelines. It can open portals. It can open alternate universes. It can cause mandala effects, etc. And literally, I felt like I was a CERN particle accelerator. And I was told that it was important because the birth codes were wrong. And it was my job to, in the ethers and in the templates of holographic reality, stretch the particleization so that she went from the 14th or the 13th, where she was taken by C-section, and stretch that time into the 17th and particleize them together as one unified force so that she could come in essence, at the right time. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but in the moment of the work, I knew exactly what I was doing. I go into the grids, I stretch things and I spin things with sacred geometry, and I knew exactly when I was coming, when the timelines were moving, what it was doing, and I knew it was this work is, I don't know how to explain it other than when you are in this work, it is so clear, it is so guided, it is so precise. It's when I come back into this body that things seem wonky, that things here seem not necessarily real. When I'm in that space and time, that's my real. And I don't know how to put it any other way. But in that process, I was working with Ramona saying, now it's safe, now it's safe. This is a portal of entry. This is about time vectors. And I had never even heard the word vectors before. I've done timelines, I've done time shifting, I've done time codes. But time vectors, I did not know what that was. So way after the work, the next day or into that evening, I looked up on, I always work with Lisa Renee's Ascension Glossary, and I Googled time vectors. And all of us humans, all life forms on our planet have interconnected bioenergy fields. We're all just energy. We're composed of networks and networks of energy. We know we're electrical, we know we're circuitry, we know we're magnetic, electrical, magnetic, we know all of that, which makes up our individualness and our collectiveness. Okay, so we're like an electromagnetic battery or body, and this is how we are all one, but yet we are all individuals. So this is what is held in our light body and our aura. This is what I work with all the time. We also have these bodies of experiences into our ethers, multiverses, etc., over and over again. So the human light body is configured with specific electrical circuits in our root layers, okay, that are designed energetically to interface and lock down our light body's grounding, to put us in here, to make us safe in our container, to put us inside of the vehicle that we are here to experience our life in. And this is a mechanism that connects us directly to our planet as well as our cosmos. Again, planet, magnet, cosmos, our head, our upper body, spiritual plane is our cosmic father energy, lower plane is our magnetic mother energy. So we are not generally taught to think about this, and this is my world, this is normal for me. So, but most are not taught to think that the human body is radiating out electromagnetic fields, okay, that are interacting with other electromagnetic fields. But for me, that's really normal. So my job was to find her electromagnetic field, align it with this one here on this planetary existence, and do the CERN particleization to open a portal and stretch time. And it was very, very important because this is what time vectors do. They create pathways, and they create pathways in the context of time. And so the consciousness then has an ability to travel that pathway. So Ramona's only consciousness at this point, she's a body down here, which is an empty vessel of sorts that is being held on by this wonderful medical staff. But my job is to find her consciousness vehicle, align it, and create the vector code so that she can consciously travel between different points of time space. And at the same time, my job was to collide time space and open up from the 13th to the 17th, so her time vector and her birth codes were correct. So I hope this is making some sense, and if it isn't, it's fine, just let it go. But I create spins between electrical fields. I work between the magnetic field as well, but I'm mostly in the cosmos and the electric fields. And I spin that within the light bodies of the body that's down here still as Ramona, and the essence of the consciousness body that is the higher self of Ramona. And all of that is going to determine the position of the consciousness identity who is located in her body down here and will travel through time to get there. So it is like a portal entry, and we drop her into literally her physical form. So this can happen independent of where the physical body is actually located. So I'm working in a non-location and a location at the same time, and shifting, while at the same time stretching. So it was a really interesting configuration and something I had never done before. And to me, it was absolutely fascinating and utterly thrilling, and so honored to be able to assist and help. And yet, you don't know what's going to happen, because ultimately that soul still has a choice. They still have free will choice. So no matter how much I open the pathway, Ramona's higher self, even though Ramona's the lower version, the higher version of her, the higher mind, the soul itself, is still in charge of the choice of coming through. So after the work, we get to wait. But remember, our higher consciousness is basically, it's fluid energy that is made up of vector fields that contain potentials of activating time codes in our DNA. This is why codes are important. We come in from a higher perspective in between lifetimes in God source with codes that are important, that reside in our DNA, and they will activate in alignment with what I chose to do in an in-between life situation. My soul, my essence, my being is choosing to come to this planet at a certain time with universal time codes, planetary time codes, my individual time codes. I'm choosing all of these things. And so I think what is frustrating for me sometimes is the medical field is doing their best to take the baby early because they don't want to have any complications, and yet it screws everything up, and they have no idea of any of this. And on the flip side, they don't have any healer or energy practitioner colliding particleization of time code and vectors. I mean, it's we lose people in this regard. And again, that would be because the choice of that higher being didn't have the opportunity to make a secondary choice, I guess. And so this is about consciousness that is actually shifting, and it is skipping through time-space continuums. It's crazy stuff. And time vector codes were new for me. They manifest as coordinate location pathways. Okay, but this is in multidimensional spaces, and I've done this before with planets. I've done it with constellations. I've done it by moving codes in the constellations and the planets, but I've just never done it with a human entity before. So the honor of working with, God forbid, my own grandchild, right? Fractalization of my own essence was just beyond, it chokes me up again, beyond anything that I ever thought was even something I would be allowed to do. And yeah, it was fascinating. And the moment that I did this ritual and this work for probably 3 to 3.5 hours. When I was done, went back into a meditation, grateful space, closed down everything, closed my room, cut all the cords from it. Super important for me to cut my energy from it. I'm still working on that right now because she's pretty embedded in my essence. But felt very, very good about, it's in the hands of what other people would call, it's in the hands of God now, because it still is, source energy is still God source, right? But it is that we are co-creating our own realities. There isn't a God floating around up there that's deciding if this baby comes or not. This baby is a fractalization of the God source that had a bumpy, fell off the rails and had some decisions to make. And I believe this child is extremely powerful. Well, I know it with all of my essence because I can feel it. And to choose that entry date of, that magnificent, portal energy, lunar eclipse energy, equinox energy, supermoon energy. I mean, it's insane. She's got some stuff to do here, and I'm so pleased and honored and glad that she chose to follow through on this mission. The moment that I finished it, I let myself chill, I cleared everything out. I texted my son again and I said, I've got her aligned. She's going to drop in. You'll hear something within the next hour. And sure enough, for the third out of three times he called and he said, Mom, it's incredible. Neurology doesn't know what happened. They're completely stunned. They have no idea what happened. She's completely online. She's moving. She's breathing. She's doing this and that and the other thing. So the lungs were cleared so she could start to breathe. And the heart was working and the valve was holding. So, I mean, and what was most important is her neurology turned on and she started to actually activate the body. Up until that point, it was just a vessel of non-movement. And so the fascinating jump from being a vessel of non-movement to fully in is something that we do. This is what we all do. She just had an extraordinary way of experiencing it. But this is something that is so incredibly huge and wonderful. These beings that we walk, these bodies that we walk around in, are divine vessels. They are not just something that's too fat or too skinny or too old or too young. They are divine vessels that are holding vector time codes, birth codes, codes for the universe, codes for the planet. We are here as an expression of a fractalization of source, and we've got shit to do. And the best thing we can do with this individualized personality fractal is to figure out why the heck I'm here. And why the heck we're here is totally different for every one of us. Not everybody does what I do, and I'm not special and I'm not cool. But we're all special and we're all cool when we figure out why we're here. So, I mean, it is about being special, but everybody's special. So don't be hubris about it, but own the fact that you are on this planet because you chose. And she chose. So it will be really fun to watch her open and evolve over the years and figure out what she really came here to do, which I believe will be quite extraordinary. Lastly, we got to actually hold her probably about a week after she was, coming out of everything and in her body, maybe a week and a half. And the first time I held her, my son and daughter-in-law said she was still having baby convulsions or almost little baby seizures from the fentanyl, I believe is what they had her on during the really tough time. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, she still does this like seizuring thing and she jumps and she. And I said, oh my God, let me hold her. And again, this is what I do for work. And so I love that my kid is so open for everything. He's like, Mom, see what you can do. So I held her, and all of that electricity from those meds was still churning through that itty bitty 6-pound body. In that this is something else that the medical field doesn't understand. A practitioner that does energy work, especially a telepathic clairvoyant, can actually just do it. I could do it, her laying in the hospital. But the power of holding that baby, I shifted that stuff out of her in a matter of probably 4 to 6 minutes. That's all I held her. And she was completely fine after that because that reaction still churning through her body is another electrical surge. It is a templated surge that's moving through her light body. Yes, it's in her human body, but more so the instruction set is where I can find it in the light body. So we can clear that stuff and she can be free of that. I've done many, many, many of my friends and family when they're coming out of surgery and they're still under anesthesia, and we can clear that stuff like almost instantaneously, and it really progresses their healing very fast because we don't want those meds churning through our bodies. We need them for the process, but we don't want them afterwards for the healing. So these are the things that hopefully medicine in the Western world and the so-called spiritual world will dovetail eventually so that we are working hand in hand because nobody is doing this alone. We are all doing this from a higher source energy. And again, I want to stress that beautiful medical staff that was so tenacious and wonderful and kind to our kids was filled and backed up with light beings beyond measure. I see them as just a beam of light. You can call them an alien, you can call them an angel. I don't care what you call them. All it is source energy and an expression and an extension of each of those medical people as well. So this is a team effort, and it was a fascinating, fabulous opportunity for me to stretch into vectors, which I had not really done in that regard before. Colliding particleization was fascinating. Opening the portal, and then most of all, finding her in the ethers was just beyond. So take what you care to from this. If you want to toss it all, that's fine too. If you want to share it, that's fine too. But I just thought that it would be really cool to, first and foremost, share it with my Vibe tribe. All of you have had my back in every way, shape, or form, especially during these personal times, and I appreciate you more than you know. The Vibe Tribe people are so beautiful when they pull together and hold such beautiful prayer space for healing, and I thank you. If we choose to share this beyond that with anybody else, that's great. We'll figure that out later. But in the meantime, thank you, thank you. And until we see you again, and on behalf of Mitchell, Aja, and especially Ramona, cosmic hugs.